Good afternoon. Welcome to the FTD University webinar titled 5 Keys to Family Business Success. Today, you will hear a high-level view of the unique challenges and opportunities that come with a family business, as well as 5 specific practical tactics that successful families use in day-to-day operations. Mike Fassler, a consultant with the Family Business Consulting Group, will be leading this informative webinar. He has been serving family businesses since 1984, providing family business planning services with a focus on helping his clients grow their relationships, capabilities, and businesses. Mike helps families develop and implement plans to transfer leadership, management, and ownership of their businesses to both family and non-family successors. A significant component of his work with clients includes strategic planning with an emphasis on helping clients balance the competing demands of the family and the business as the business grows. Once Mike is finished with his presentation, we will open the webinar up for questions. If you have a question, simply type it in the question box on the upper right side of your screen. We will take the questions in the order they are received. Feel free to submit your questions during the presentation, and we will hold them until the Q&A portion of the webinar. So without further ado, I would like to turn the call over to Mike to begin the webinar. Mike?
Janet, thank you for the introduction. I'm so very pleased to be with all of you today to share some ideas and practices that will help you get the best out of family and the best out of business on your way to family business success. As far as an agenda, I want to talk a little bit about your environment that I've gotten to know as I've worked with some florists over the past few years. Then I'm going to cover 5 keys that Janet referenced in the title, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A. And the embracing the challenge we're going to start with, that's inherent when you bring, let me back up, sorry. Embracing the challenge, that's inherent when you bring family and business together. We're going to discuss the importance of what I call parallel planning, or planning for the family and the business with one another. And then the third topic key is going to be around effective communication, perhaps the most difficult key to get a handle on. And then the next generation is the lifeblood of the future of a family business, and that's why next generation development is one of the keys. And then we'll finish with talking about the importance of professionalization of your business, or evolving how you make decisions as your family and your business move through their respective life cycles. So about the first 30 to 35 minutes will be on the 5 keys, and then we'll be open it up for some Q&A for 25 to 30 minutes. So first, a bit about the environment you have. So family and business matters are at the core of your daily lives, and they overlap, they intermingle, and some days that's something you really appreciate and value, and I'm sure there's other days when the mix of family and business presents some seemingly insurmountable challenges. And you experience stiff competition, for example, from grocery stores, and you have margin pressures there. You add in a lot of togetherness, sometimes in smaller physical spaces where finding some time for privacy can be a challenge. Then you have some additional pressure from the financial dependency on the business due to the reliance on business profits to fund your current net period income and to build a retirement account and to fund growth of the business. And what would a family business be without some generational differences with multiple family members working in the business? And I've noticed it sure takes some diverse talent to be successful in a florist business by combining some creative genius for design and customer service balanced with the realities of business operations. All of this lends itself well to creating an environment of pretty high relationship intensity. So what I hope to help you with today is to apply the knowledge and practices from the 5 keys to family business success to help you manage that intensity. In 2013, I conducted a florist survey around a few family business topics. Here's what I found. The typical florist business consists of multi-generational businesses with multiple family members working in the business. 87% of the respondents are owned by generation 2 or beyond, and there's an average of over 4 family members working in the business. Another finding was that the business is central to personal financial health, with 95% of the respondents indicating that the business is their primary source of income. And 65% rated communication within their family business as the most difficult of difficult topics. So this information, along with my family business experience across other industries, helped me inform my thoughts on which keys that are perhaps most applicable to you. Let's just talk a minute about what success looks like. Since it starts with family harmony. Family harmony can be a tailwind for success, or lack of it at the extreme can be what brings the business down. None of my clients would ever define success and leave out the importance of family harmony. So family harmony is a key part of success. There has to be an economically viable business. Beyond figuring out how to create and capture value in your individual markets, the scale of your business must match up with the number of family branches that it can support. And the reality is that many families grow faster than their businesses, and sometimes difficult choices must be made as to who in the family can participate in order to maintain viable business operations. And lastly, success includes personal financial security for the families working in the business. So getting into the keys, with that as some background, first is embrace the challenge of family and business. And let's take a look at some fundamental differences between family and business and the overlap between the two. There's really two different rounds, and the fundamental differences between family and business creates a natural tension. Families on the left-hand side there is about an unconditional acceptance. We're born into our families. From a business viewpoint, it's about conditional acceptance. We get hired. So as family businesses consider the hiring of family members, a strictly family lens might suggest that every family member can have a job and a paycheck regardless of the needs of the business or the capabilities of the family member. That would represent, if you will, unconditional acceptance. Whereas a business lens would suggest that there are employment opportunities for family members if there is a need and you have the competence to perform, or conditional acceptance. So you can see the challenge for a parent who is also a manager-owner having around the competing lenses of family and business when it comes to family member employment. What's the answer? Well, no one size fits all, and every family should go through a process of discovering what's the proper balance between family and business. But here's one thing for sure that I want you to know and take home with you, and that is that if you make it all about the family or you make it all about the business, you're going to create some problems in the other realm. So the key is to pay attention to and consider both family and business. A couple other fundamental differences: that families are socialistic. Everybody gets an equal share, whereas businesses are capitalistic. The best performers come out ahead. Family environments are cooperative. Business environments are competitive. Family environments are emotional. Business is about being rational and logical. So if you're working with a family member and their actions and decisions relative to the business just don't make sense, become a little curious and begin to inquire as to what family considerations might be driving their actions. Because if they're looking at the situation through a family lens rather than a business lens, they could be right, but it could be very different if you're looking at it through if you're looking at it through a business lens. So, the answer to the question, am I looking at this through a family lens or a business lens, can often help unlock the motivations and allow you to better connect with one another excuse me, on the most difficult of matters. So the bottom line, what makes family business different from just business? The family influence on business decisions. You know, what makes sense as a leader of the business often doesn't make sense as a parent, and what makes sense as a parent often doesn't make sense as a business leader. And the success of a family enterprise hinges on the family's ability to manage these fundamental differences. Let's take a look at another aspect of embracing the challenge of family and business, and that's recognizing that you're often engaged in multiple roles simultaneously. The three-circle diagram of family, ownership, and management reflects the roles, the different roles of a family member, a manager, and an owner, and the overlap that exists among the three roles. Having this overlap certainly aids in quicker decision-making on the one hand, but roles can be confusing on the other, particularly when multiple family members are involved in the business. Managing these multiple roles and understanding what responsibility each person has in each of the roles is part of embracing the challenge of family business. For example, what if you have an in-law employed in the business and they're not performing? And they're not performing to the point of needing to be fired. As the manager of the business, the best business decision might be to let the in-law go. However, looking at it through your role as a parent of their spouse, you might have concerns about your child's family branch financial well-being if you fire the in-law. But in your role as a parent, you might work with your child and your in-law, who you've just fired, to support them in the transition to another career. In that way, you could fulfill your role as both a parent and the leader of the business. So embrace the challenge. Successful business families have tremendous respect for the challenge of combining family with business. It shouldn't be easy just because it's family, but it can be better if done well. And doing it well begins with accepting the tension that family and business creates. Let's turn now to the second key, parallel planning. A family I work with in the Midwest, and which owns an equipment dealership, decided to incorporate parallel planning into their planning process. They recently conducted their first family meeting where they brought 3 generations of family members together. In this gathering, they shared a bit about the history of their ancestors and the business, and at a high level, the plans for the future of the business. They also discussed the employment and ownership pathway for family members that might have interest in participating in the business in the future. So one thing that came out of this meeting was a sense of gratitude throughout the family for being better informed. Because after all, even for those not involved in the business, it is still a part of their identity because of their experiences when they were growing up. This family business, as most are, is very visible in their community. So a big discovery during the meeting was that family members not involved in the business, yet were identified within the community as being part of the family, were often asked questions about the business they just weren't equipped to answer. So those family members shared that this made them feel pretty uneasy, and as we discussed what types of questions people in the community had and what kind of answers were being provided, it became pretty apparent that at minimum mixed information, if not misinformation, was inadvertently being spread. So an ad hoc group was formed with a combination of family working in the business and family not working in the business to come up with the questions that were out there and to develop appropriate responses. And that exercise brought a tremendous level of comfort to all family members, and it made good business sense because everybody throughout the family was then representing the family business brand consistently. So this is a great illustration of parallel planning, where planning considers the interaction and mutual influence of the family and the business, and the importance of reaching out to the family for input. A couple other quick examples of parallel family. One family I work with has located satellite operations based on geographic areas where family members wanted to live. Clearly a family consideration there. Another family turned down a significant and attractive out-of-state expansion opportunity because it would have meant that the next generation and their grandchildren would be living a plane ride away rather than within driving distance. So considering family and business is what puts the strength of family into family business. So we've discussed that there's this natural tension that results in a family business when we look at when family expectations are being balanced with the demands of the business. And we've covered that parallel planning as a way to consider both the family and the business as you develop plans for the future. So let's take a look now at the components of parallel planning and talk about some examples with each of these. So the first is culture. The first one I want to touch on is culture. And culture is about, what do we value and where are we headed as a family and a business. Culture is about how you do things around here. In the case of one of my clients, they fundamentally believe that the building blocks to a strong family are strong individuals. So to support this belief, the family business has created a temporary employment program which supports family member education in a way that's not generally available in the marketplace. Additionally, part of their employment program includes employment assistance for employees that have a physical or mental impairment. Both of those programs exist in what otherwise is a merit-based employment and compensation process. So I challenge each of you to explore and uncover and reach consensus on the purpose of your business and your family's ownership of it. With that in hand, you'll have the context to help you navigate your way to what otherwise can be some pretty difficult decisions. Next up is control, or how decisions get made. At one time or another, each of us has heard from one of our children, a sibling, our spouse, or an employee, that's not fair. At the root of that statement is usually the impression that how the decision got made is not fair because they didn't understand what rules or guidelines were applicable in making the decision. Or at a minimum, the rules or guidelines were not discussed and agreed upon in advance. So an important part of parallel planning is to plan out how decisions will be made. With this in hand, all stakeholders are in a much better position to accept decisions because they believe the process to be fair, and the decisions will appear less ad hoc and less personal. Next, let's talk a bit about careers, or how leadership roles are allocated. Careers, it's about defining the pathway to leadership roles in the family business as an employee as well as an owner. The Midwest equipment dealership I referenced earlier, they've done a great job of defining this for their family business. And then let's spend a minute on capital, how resources are invested. Money's not everything, but capital does provide us with options. And making decisions about the options available that capital brings can create tension because, when you have a choice to make, those can be some pretty tough decisions. So parallel planning decisions around capital includes making decisions about what are we going to take as current period personal income to support our family's desired lifestyle and perhaps to fund personal retirement cash flow balanced with reinvestment in the business. A great example of a parallel planning decision in regard to capital is a client with a wholesale distribution business with significant seasonality that drives a peak need for transportation and logistics services. This, combined with a family member that had this deep passion and commitment to build such a company, led the family to significantly forego personal income and up their reinvestment rate in the business during the startup and ramp up of this captive transportation and logistics company. And so again, you can see both the business reason and the family reasons for making the decisions they did. And lastly, connection. Through all of this, how do we protect family relationships so we have that family harmony? This involves the things that you do on a regular basis to keep family members informed about the business at an appropriate level. What you talk about, how you talk about the business at home, it's a time you're having tremendous influence on your family, because as they observe and listen, they're forming up a viewpoint as to whether the business is a positive influence on their life or not. In summary, parallel planning considers the family's influence on the business and will help you to manage the natural tension that is going to occur. Our third key is around communication. In the Flora survey, I asked about the causes of communication challenges, and the top 4 rankings were personalities, afraid of conflict, hey, we just don't take the time, and I'm not clear on what my role is. So, 2 of the reasons, personalities and afraid of conflict, are behavioral reasons for communication being a challenge, and 2 of the reasons are structural, those being taking the time and unclear roles. I'm going to suggest to you that the causes are related and they intertwine because, for example, if there's not effective communication happening, then I'm going to be less inclined to take the time to communicate. Both of those reasons being cited as reasons for having communication challenges. So let's use these results to learn in some more detail about communication. I want to refer back to the 3-circle model that I introduced earlier for our discussion on communication. Effective communication in a family business starts with knowing yourself and knowing your audience. And by knowing, I mean knowing your own and one another's behavioral tendencies. Knowing how you tend to behave in your role as a family member, in your role as a manager, and in your role as an owner. And also knowing how your sibling or your parent tends to behave in the role or roles they're in. Getting to know one another's behavioral tendencies is most easily done by going through a behavioral assessment such as Myers-Briggs or DISC. I don't know how many times I've debriefed a family group on their individual behavioral tendencies and their tendencies as a group, and a light bulb of understanding goes on. A sister, for example, realizing that, after all, my brother's not really a jerk. That's just the way he tends to behave because he's wired that way. That it can provide a tremendous sense of relief with future interactions being taken a lot less personal. Another example that comes to mind is a family business owned and managed by 3 siblings, with each managing a different location. When they figured out that as a group that they have a tendency to challenge one another most of the time rather than support one another, they started a deliberate program that they called PSVs, or partner support visits, where they visited one another's location twice per year with the focus on supporting, not challenging, their sibling partner during that time together. So because of their tendency to challenge, they had to be very deliberate about spending some time supporting one another. Let's now talk about building the capability to have difficult conversations. The capability of having difficult conversations with family members is foundational to family harmony and therefore family business success. Difficult conversations are those where opinions vary, emotions are running strong, and the stakes are high. This capability is one of the least understood and most resisted practices within family businesses. And I believe the lack of understanding and the resistance stems from family members simply not knowing how to have these conversations. And not knowing how is often the result of a family culture that suppresses conflict, because it is generally believed that conflict is not a good thing, so let's avoid it. The downside to this is that family members really don't ever learn how to fight fair. There is going to be conflict and tension is going to build if you have a family business. And the goal should be to effectively resolve some of the conflicts, those that can be resolved, and the ones that can't, simply manage the conflict in a respectful way through periodically having the necessary difficult conversations. You know, a few tips around having difficult conversations: always speak from the first person viewpoint. Share what you think, what you believe, excuse me, and what you feel, and not what the other person should think, believe, or feel. You know, be patient for resolution to unfold, and reduce intensity by releasing tension more frequently with the frequency of your conversations. So build that capability to have those difficult conversations. The next part of communication is that you simply have to spend time together in the venue appropriate for the topic. Take care of topics related to family matters during family discussions, management matters during management meetings, and ownership matters during ownership meetings. Good example of this is 3 siblings and a father that I currently work with have been trying to cover family and management and ownership topics in 1 meeting per year, combined with dinner and drinks. This is driven by the father's distaste for meetings in general, as he believes them to be a waste of time. And they may have been a waste of time until his sons decided to join the business, and probably then time to evolve things. You know, part of their challenge is to evolve their culture to a point where spending time together outside of the day-to-day hustle and bustle of the business is viewed as being productive work, which heretofore it has not been viewed that way. And lastly, know who is accountable for what. Knowing what is expected of one another and how you're going to measure results is foundational to effective communication. Absent these defined expectations, you just don't have the boundaries within which to have your conversations. Key number 4, next generation development. Next generation, it's the lifeblood of family business continuity, so next generation development is one of the keys to success. And I'm going to cover 5 points, all of which are best for the business and for the family as it relates to the development pathway. First of all, consider the next generation perspective. Reach out to them and include them in conversations about the future and what they want out of your family business. Your business may have started with your dream, and incorporating the next generation's dreams into the plans builds next generation commitment. Likewise, understanding the pressures they feel is an important part of communication and development. And knowing those pressures will help you to better know how to support them. Secondly is around real responsibility, accountability, and risk. You know, there's nothing like proving your capabilities to yourself and in turn to others around you to build personal credibility within the family and the business. To do this, the next generation must have real responsibility, be accountable for results, and take some personal risk, whether it be their personal reputation or personal capital. This is often done by first achieving some personal success outside of the family business and then having increasing levels of responsibilities within the business. Third area is around accurate feedback on performance. You know, the precursor to accurate feedback on performance is defining expectations for behaviors and results, and then simply comparing those actual behaviors and results to the expectations. You know, admittedly, this can get tricky with family members, but if you have built your capabilities to have difficult conversations, there's a big payoff in terms of development of the next generation when you're providing accurate feedback on performance. Start early, be patient. At an early age, children are gaining impressions as to whether this thing called a family business is good for them and for the family, or perhaps not such a good thing. So start early with next generation development by having the next generation sharing positive experiences about the business, whether it's a structured visit for some shadowing or observation, or going along to some industry trade events and conventions. And then finally, development of business acumen. And that stems from having experiences along the way that include decision-making authority and the opportunity to exercise personal judgment. You know, I'm going to close here with our content on key number 5 around professionalization. And it's not about choosing between a family business or a professionally managed business. It's really about evolving your family business to being professionally managed. Professionalization is simply an organized way to make decisions. And how you do that should evolve over time. You know, for example, with founders or single controlling owners, you know, autocratic decision-making is a common decision-making model and really quite effective. And as your family business moves to a group of siblings, evolving to a consensus decision-making model is often the best way to go. You know, sometimes there will be one or more siblings that mimics the leading generation's autocratic decision-making style, and that's often met with mixed results. And if you get to the cousin stage where there's cousins involved in owning and managing a business, usually by then, assuming there's you know, a good number of folks, family members in the business, we'll see voting to be more common for decision making. You know, keep in mind that one size doesn't fit all, and you know, part of the professionalization process is figuring out what will work best for your family and your business. Yes, there's best practices out there, but what's best for your particular business is what's important. You know, another help to evolving the professionalization of your business is figuring out what will work best by bringing in some independent viewpoints. A good place to glean these viewpoints from are peer groups that you maybe participate in with folks that you don't compete with directly, and or trusted advisors who are respectfully and brutally honest with you. In the family meetings, don't leave them out. And you know, how that interaction happens, maybe it's very informally initially, but as the business expands and the number of family members involved in the business expands, getting a little more formal and structured with family members is usually, or with family meetings, is usually good practice. And finally, have those fair processes for making decisions, including how to change how you make decisions as you evolve the professionalization of your business. So those are the 5 keys, and this concludes the first portion of our time together, and we're now going to turn to a question and answer session.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for sharing a lot of great information with us today. As Mike just mentioned, we are, of course, open for questions. So if you have a question, simply type it in that question box on the upper right side of your screen, and we'll start taking them in the order they come in. Our first question is from Jason, and he has a question about your comments on the importance of building the capability to have those difficult conversations. He said, what about for those in a family business that have not developed this capability and are reluctant, if not terrified, to give it a try? How might they get started, Mike?
Jason, that's a great question. That is an absolute great question. You know, let me start by saying that, you know, if there's one party that's reluctant or even terrified, as you put it, of trying, you can rest assured that others in the family are also reluctant or even terrified to enter into those conversations. And, you know, I think that reluctance, you know, often stems from not knowing if it's going to be safe to have that type of conversation. Because, you know, I say safe because whenever you venture into a difficult conversation where, you know, opinions are going to vary, emotions are strong, and the stakes are high, you are making yourself vulnerable because you don't know how the other person is going to respond. Hey, you know, what if Dad gets angry with me and then we have to spend the entire day together tomorrow? What if my brother doesn't like what I have to say and storms out during what is our busiest time of year. So as you think about having difficult conversations, start by getting in a frame of mind of knowing what you want for yourself, what you want for the other person, and what do you want for the relationship as you discuss and work through the matter at hand. Remember, you want to address the topic and maintain or even build the relationship. Strong relationships are built on the backs of successful, difficult conversations. A couple other things are start the conversation by scheduling some dedicated and private time to have the discussion. Nobody likes an ambush. You might start by saying, by saying, for example, hey George, I've been thinking about name the topic for a while. It seems that you and I may not be aligned on how to proceed. I would like for us to schedule some time to meet to discuss it. When would be a good time for you over the next couple weeks? That probably sounds a little formal, and it is, and it should be, because the formality can take the edge off the conversation. The goal here is no surprises, no ambushes. And then go into it with the right frame of mind, and that's the right frame of mind is not making any conclusions about what the other person thinks or feels or what their viewpoint is. It has to be an open mind as to their viewpoint. And then just simply continue with the facts, share your story, your viewpoint about the matter, speak from the first person, as I mentioned earlier. And then ask for their insight and viewpoint and whether they even think there's a problem or one on the way. Be patient and allow time for things to unfold. And and sometimes it takes multiple sessions to work through a particular issue. And and don't leave the first session if it's going to take more than one session. Don't leave that session until you have the second one scheduled. Great question. Thanks, Jason.
All right, Mike, I just want to remind everybody that if you do have a question, type it in that question box on the upper right side of your screen, and we'll start taking them as they're coming in. And then, Mike, if you want to switch to the next slide, too, so in case anybody has some deeper questions, your email address is there that they can grab that while they're doing it. Our next question we do have is from Misty. She said they only have one non-family member that works there, and they've been going through all the growing pains, and they've learned how to interact. The problem is she's the 39-year-old daughter of the business, and there seems to be some tension after 2 years now. She feels like there is a distorted view of how things really are for her. How would you handle this if it were you?
Okay, so there's that. I want to make sure I've got the facts clear here. There's only one non-family member?
Yes.
And it's the 39-year-old daughter. That's where I got a little confused with the question there, please.
Yes, Misty is the 39-year-old daughter in the business.
Okay, and so there's only one non-family member. And the challenge is?
That she says now there seems to be some tension after 2 years, and she feels like there's a distorted view of how things really are for her. So how would you handle it if it were you?
Okay. Great way. Thank you. Thank you for the. For the
here's one. She said the non-family member seems to have tension towards her. Okay.
And so it sounds like the 39-year-old daughter has come into the business recently and has been there about 2 years. And 2 years is it's a common point where tension would typically develop. And I think it's one of those situations where perhaps the non-family member feels threatened. Particularly if that non-family member is a veteran employee.
Mike, she says she's been there 12 years in the business.
Oh, she's been there 12 years. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, I think it's
simply... only in the last 2 years have they had the non-employee, the one non-family member.
Okay. So I think it's a matter of, starting the dialogue with that person in a, scheduled, non-threatening environment. And try to gather some perspective, their perspective as to whether or not they're feeling tension, whether they're feeling the tension as well, and just open it up and don't go in with preconceived notions about why that's happening.
All right, our next question is from Dennis. He said, how do you let second generation owners gain ownership privileges?
Great question, Dennis. One of the things, if you think about the ownership privileges and the responsibilities that go along with that, a good way to start it, is to set some expectations about ownership behaviors being demonstrated in advance even of ownership positions. And then often a great way then to allow that next generation to start to build some equity in the operation is to share go-forward profits with the next generation as a way to start to build their equity position. So it'd be a matter of sharing profits in different proportion than the capital accounts in the business. And you do have to have the right type of entity, set up the proper way to be able to make that happen.
All right, our next question is from Susanna. She wants to know, how do you deal with a non-family member that is extremely sensitive?
Non-family member that is extremely sensitive. Again, I think it's trying to understand. Start by trying to understand from their viewpoint why they are so sensitive. Perhaps it's an educational opportunity because they don't know how to have a more difficult conversation, or it could be that person has had some life experiences that have been tough on them, and they're just totally scared to death of engaging in any level of difficult conversation. And so other than approaching it gingerly, respectfully, I think in setting the expectation around improvement and providing the support for that person to improve would be part of the key to it.
Alrighty. Just as a reminder for everybody, Mike's email is on the screen, Fassler at thefbcg.com. If you need to reach out to him further in depth. We have another question from Misty. She said that there seems to be a common irritation in a family business is that the non-family member seems threatened or something, or maybe it will always have that feeling for someone not in the family. Is that kind of...
Well, it's common that non-family members can feel threatened because sometimes I think to be at a non-family member to be at their best, they really can't be part of the family, and if their expectations are that they are part of the family, sometimes that's where some of the rub comes in. So I think a way to help through that is often education about for the non-family member about how to operate and be successful as a non-family member in a family business, because there are some patterns at work, and learning about those patterns, learning more about those patterns in terms of what it takes to be successful would be part of that process.
All right, our next question is from Tim. He said they have a small shop, 6 people total, which includes his wife and himself. They've been in business 4 years, and the shop has grown each year. His wife is the owner, and he's learning the floral business, but his background is a lot different than this. When does he say he's in over his head and say uncle and call it quits?
Boy, Tim, I'm not sure I can answer. When do you throw it in? Call uncle and call it quits. I think perhaps maybe setting up some timelines and milestones around improvement or getting to a better situation. And maybe the role you're in perhaps just doesn't fit well with what your talents are. So you might compare that and see if perhaps you might fit in in a different role that's needed by the business. But I would certainly, if it's frustrating, if it's not working, I would set some timelines, some milestones, and work towards some improvement. And if not, sometimes it is best for the business and it is best for the family to make a respectful exit.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. We've got another question from Anita. She has 2 siblings. They all grew up in the family business, but they decided to go on to different careers. And now they think that they are entitled to ownership of the business after their mother passes. And she wants to know if you have suggestions on how to handle this situation.
So, with mom owning the business and, 3 children, 1 working in the business and, entitled to ownership, I'd really, want to understand what that means for, through their eyes. But, what I will say is that as you think about the typical size florist business, and Anita, I have no idea, what size your business is, but they are best owned by the operator manager. These size businesses are best owned by operator managers. And because to have, family members that are owners in small to mid-sized businesses, there's a certain way to that's best to govern those businesses so that those folks have an ownership voice. But you really have to have sufficient scale within the business to support the the time and commitment it takes for the non-operating owners. And so I think turning the discussion to more of a 2 things. 1, your mother's overall estate plan would be important, but also 2, sometimes family members not working in a business, they reach back in, they somehow want to stay attached because there's that emotional connection. And there are some ways through family meetings and family experiences to preserve that emotional attachment but not be an owner in the business.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Well, it looks like that we are out of questions for today. We just want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. If you missed a portion of the webinar or you would like to view it again, a replay will be available at FTD University Online later this week. The webinar materials are always available at ftdi.com. That web address where they're available is on the screen right now. Simply click on to FTD University logo on the bottom of the home page, click through to that webinar series page. As always, we will be sending you a very brief survey to gather your feedback on today's webinar, so we would ask that you please take a minute to complete the survey so that we can improve future webinars and other education programs for you. The next FTD webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, December 2nd. FTD Education Consultant Christine Kratt shares upcoming event trends for 2015 and how to tailor them for your local customers. Registration is already available at ftdi.com, so be sure to register as soon as possible to reserve your spot. Again, thank you, Mike, so much for sharing lots of great information on the specific practical tactics that successful families use in day-to-day operations. This concludes FTD's webinar, 5 Keys to Family Business Success. Thank you.